Well, I'd like to start by thanking Ola and Liz for inviting me here today. I think it's a really tremendous initiative, and it's great to get the opportunity to hear people like Alison and Jan, and to share a platform with Paddy and Jim. I rattle around in different areas than Paddy and Jim, and we don't often come together. I just got a few slides which I hope will give her a flavour of myself, my research, and some of the issues that I think badly needs to be addressed. The title of my own research is Exploring Recovery from Mental Illness Through the Narratives of Members of GROW in Ireland. Yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about vision for change, and it never struck me the word change. I always thought of the vision and how great it would be, but I was talking to a social psychologist, and he said he can't think of one national organisation, government organisation, that has ever changed. So when you look at the difficulties of changing, personal change, when you're highly motivated, you're motivated by pain, and when you look at the political mess out there, it's very difficult to see how vision for change is going to come about. And I think the only way it will is if we as service users become strong enough and well organised enough and strategic enough to sort of have a mini revolution in different places. Anyway, who am I? I'm an ex-service user. I come from a medical family. Both my parents were doctors. My dad was fairly renowned in the field of mental health. He won a medal from the Queen when I was in India off my head, which I always thought was quite ironic. But I had years of terrifying levels of anxiety, drug and alcohol abuse and personal injury. I was always hurting myself. I was hearing voices and had very strange ideas. And I was diagnosed as pathologically shy in 1969 and prescribed Librium. I'm also married to Fran. We met in Kabul in the swinging 60s. In 1969, she was diagnosed first of all with postpartum depression, schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, and finally promoted to bipolar. From 1973 to 1988, both of us recovered, a journey which started with GROW. So one of the things that, the difficulties that I'm finding in my research is the different definitions of mental illness. Is it an illness? Is it distress? Is it a lack of resources? Is it a choice that people make in an attempt to control their lives? Is it a call to change? Is it a normal human process? Or is it a form of spiritual formation? And the way I try and look at it, I see everybody as kind of a universal soldier, and we're all armed with these three things. We have our sword of truth, and we hack our way through life. We all have our friends, and we all develop a certain character. So, just to look at recovery, there are really two main definitions of recovery. The first one is the medical version, and the second one is the empowerment version. And they have two languages, two sets of values. This is the medical model, the truth as medical model. And you see mental illness as a disease. You don't see the person as being relevant to that disease at all, because you're after the disease. Recovery is synonymous with cure through medication. It's a lifelong condition. It's the same as spinal cord injury. It creates ongoing dependence. So who are the friends of the medical model? Well, the biggest one is the drug companies. The second one is the Mental Health Act. Number 3 is RTE and the media, who consistently trot out certain professors of psychiatry whenever there's a dispute about anything. The HSE, universities and ethics committees. I'll say a bit more about them in a minute. So the character of the medical model is it's very authoritarian, it's very elitist, it's clinical, it's value-free, they're up and outers. We always hear about the down and outers. And they're very isolated as human beings. I think it was Richard or somebody, no, it was this chap here. I had the similar experience with our psychiatrist. He recommended I went to the National Schizophrenia Association. It was their inaugural meeting. And I got a list of symptoms. And in my mind, he had more of them than I did or my wife did. And I went back and told him. And I was nearly banned from the hospital, but what a great reaction. the truth of the service user is that you feel particularly useless, you are pretty powerless, you're very much afraid, and life has just become too difficult. So who are the friends of the service user? Oh no, the character of the service user is somebody who's full of pain, he's very self-absorbed, he's usually distrustful of self or others, hopeless, vulnerable, down and out, and again isolated as a human being. So who are the friends of the service user? Well, the medical model is the biggest friend of the service user, the drug company, the researcher, the university and the trade union. And I always think of the medical model as being kind of a version of Bush, George Bush, not to do him any disservice, but they zap the illness and bury the person with the illness. So, just to talk a little bit about vulnerability, because I'm reading a lot of Arthur Frank and Rita Sharon and people like that about narratives. And they're saying that we have a lot in common, service users and service mental health professionals. And we're all very vulnerable. We're vulnerable to despair or false certainty, to isolation, false friends, to pride or shame, to fear or overconfidence, to paternalism or dependency, to false ideas or experience, to feeling we know best, to our beliefs or those of others, to power or powerlessness, to prestige and stigma. So we're all subject to taunts and jibes, whether labelled schizo or shrink. I think that the whole of the mental health service, psychiatrists are kind of the lowest form of medical doctors, or that's what I believe. So I think we have to concentrate on what we have in common. So I see service user research as a way of fighting for dialogue, for validation as a human being, and dialogue with other human beings. And if we can just forget about the labels of whether it's schizophrenia or psychiatrist. Just to let you know what my research is doing, I'll be exploring the recovery narratives of 30 to 40 seasoned members of GROW. There have been people who've been in GROW for a minimum of 3 years, demonstrated very good leadership, and they'll fulfill GROW's own criteria for recovery. The research questions, although it's an unstructured interview, my prompts will include looking at what are the things, people, beliefs, attitudes and events that help recovery. And how might these answers impact on vision for change? I think that they'll encourage others, they'll give hope to people. They should help in training of professionals. They should generate leadership. They have the potential to save huge amounts of money, and they definitely have the potential to create a community. One thing about telling your story is that you tend to create a community around you with people with similar stories. The barriers, the 2 languages. I have a friend who's just finishing a PhD, and she talks about Bildung, and it's kind of your formation. It's the view that you've been given, and you can only see that one version of reality. So hopefully the research will allow other people to see another view. The dominance of the medical model is just unbelievable. It's everywhere, and the lack of resources for service users. There's no grants, as far as I know, for service user organisations. GROW is funding this research. We can't, for things like transcription of my interviews, I don't know where we get the money from. We'll probably have a Flag Day or a Churchgate collection or something like that. Barriers. In postmodern times, knowledge has been completely corrupted. The pharmaceutical industry is 34% of the GDP in Ireland, and knowledge has just become a form of earning money, and it's peddled. So the story that can earn you the most money has become equivalent to the truth. Human beings have just become cogs in multinationals, and these actually have more power than governments. It's not only psychiatry that's corrupted by drug companies, but it's whole governments. And the mental health system is almost totally about power. So I'll just give you an example. The Trinity's Ethics Committee, and I have my supervisor's encouragement to name and shame. All my sample consider themselves recover, and they fulfil fairly stringent criteria for recovery. I have to classify them as particularly vulnerable to mental illness. Not only that, but I have to tick the box saying that they are mentally ill. And ethics committees are not forums for discussion. So that's Trinity. Hallelujah. So opportunities. I think service user research empowers service users. Even the idea of it filtering through GROW. There's a sense of excitement that we have our chance to tell a story. It should remove barriers. I think there is an interest among professionals. I gave a workshop at the Irish College of Psychiatry. They had their first conference a few weeks ago. I had 15 psychiatrists, and they were really interested. Now, I've been before, and there's absolutely no, they won't come. So I think that is hopeful. I think we'll allow in new views, and we'll humanise the system and give a voice back to the human being. I think we need to build on days like today. I think we need to copy the nurses. I mean, 10 years ago there weren't any nurses, I don't think, with degrees in Ireland. And now there's something like 28 with PhDs. I would hope that GROW now will become a real university of life, and that we'll be encouraging all our members to do bits. I love that one about aromatherapy. That's within everybody's grasp as a starting step. I found going back to college was incredibly growthful for me. I found that it's a very privileged thing to do. You're put in touch with the whole framework of questions and stories and conversations, and it helped me to make sense of life. I think we'll begin to rally people to engage in the battle for life, and I hope we learn to befriend professionals. I think we need to come up with loads of projects, alternatives, school interventions, look at prevention and retraining. And I just want to end with GROW was researched for 5 years in America, and the conclusion from Julian Rappaport was that a successful mental health system will depend less on mental health professionals' ability to create supportive environments or teach skills, and more on their ability to find and encourage naturally occurring niches in the community. So instead of trying to do everything for us, if they help us find places that suit our temperament. And I believe that service user research is a prime example of that. So thanks very much.